should be up for everyone.
You are good.
Wonderful. And just let me get, so I'm going to be asking you all to contribute a bit today on our chat box. So if you want to have that ready, and I have that open on screen to see any comments, or likewise use our Q&A. So thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be part of the Global Sake event this year and listen to these wonderful sessions. As John said, our topic is forecasting, how the customer journey will evolve. And we've seen a lot of change this year on every level in how we interact with our customers through their buying journey, and as marketers, we've had to pivot to keep up with change. And change, you know, as we look and anticipate our future changes and overcome challenges that we may face as communicators, both locally and globally, you know, this pandemic has been very positive, and it gives us that momentous leap. I feel bad now for my space picture because I won't keep up with Robert's pictures, but imagine a futuristic set, that a momentous leap that we could get to enormous growth spurt in how we work and interact with our customers. And as humans, you know, we have such creative minds, and when we're really driven, we can pull it out of the bag. So between people, technology, and process, we can really influence and shape change. And history has shown that we are great at this. And even, you know, from Robert's pictures, as I saw in the previous session, you know, the things we accomplish is amazing. So I'm going to maybe do a quick fun 30-second detour back through the past and say, hey, you know, do you remember the Jetsons? I was a program in the 60s, and if you see here, meet Rosie the robot, and we dreamt of a robot vacuum cleaner. And in 2002, iRobot launched the Roomba, and this became mainstream. Likewise, look how far we've come in technology. 1918 saw the very first Chevy pickup truck. And now in 2020, we can't wait for Tesla to launch their new truck this Christmas. Or even back in the day, the dating process, if any of you are old enough to remember this, it was very different in the 60s. The girls sat at the side of the dance hall, waiting for the boy to come over and ask them to dance. But today, the app experience has revolutionized that whole dating world. And I wonder where we'll be in even 5 years' time. And I've been speaking a little bit about, you know, past, present, future. So we can't forget about Scrooge and who had his own change moment and turned things around. So we're looking today at the customer. And so do we see the customer changing too as a result of this large pandemic and the shift this year? How they buy and how we sell to them. When we consider the customer journey, we consider the overall experience and the series of touch points that customers go through when interacting with a company and a brand. And as a marketer, we want to reach the customer and influence their decisions so we get that conversion, but also so we can clearly map the results back to different stages of the customer journey. So about 10 years ago, McKinsey described the customer's end-to-end journey in a more linear fashion. The customer had a need, they researched, they evaluate and familiarize themselves with many brands, and then whittle that selection down to make a purchase. And that gave us predictability, but it also gave us forecastability. And it was relatively straightforward to determine where the customer had been and what their next phase would be. So with the progression of the digital age, the customer journey has evolved to include more and more touch points. And with these additional channels and more advanced technology, the phases of the journey, they begin to overlap and the flow becomes a lot more dynamic. So Adobe introduced this latest update just a few months ago. And mega trends such as the consumer's need for immediacy, and you know, no one is willing to wait for anything anymore, combined with the global expansion of content, has shaped today's customer journey. You can see it's represented by this quite messy squiggle as depicted here. So we now see multiple entry points, but what is interesting is multiple buyers also, and they're each on their own individual journeys. So how do you strategize for these different buyer personas in your content touchpoints? And the risk is too much generic content, which adds absolutely no value to the buyer's decision making. So as marketers, we need to be able to map our content to the journey and the buyer, ensuring that it's perfectly timed, it's relevant, and it's personal. So we've evolved in how we listen, engage, and reach our customers. And this year alone, we've had to navigate our way through this pandemic environment and larger shift to digital. And our lives have really become a digital production. We work from home, we do our doctor's appointments, we do our fitness classes virtually. But there is one bonus, I had to throw this in, we don't have to sit in traffic any longer for those of us in cities. But a recent HubSpot survey quantified this shift in behavior for us and says 76% of consumers have moved to now shopping online for things they would typically have purchased in person previously. So with that now, our first impressions with customers, going back from a B2B perspective, are we're making those first impressions via email, via video conference, via camera on. And we're always online. In our current state, everything is virtual. And that brings a change and shift in our behavior. So have you noticed more that you're now segmenting your online time, that you've got into work online time, social online time, and then everything we're consuming is digital. And we can't possibly take all of that information in that we're bombarded with. So we're also experiencing that consumers are making more need-based decisions rather than want-based buying decisions. And so we ask ourselves, how is this going to affect consumer and B2B behavior going forward? So we wanted to get a pulse on what's happening. And we set out a poll for our customer base and also the global Sake audience for the last 2 weeks. Thank you all for participating. And we hope this gives you some further insights also as to how we can predict or forecast the future of the customer journey. So I'd asked you to have your chat boxes ready. So if you'd like to do that, I am going to roll out these questions. And if you'd like to answer any of them live, please pop your answer into the chat box. So our first question to our survey group was around the permanency of user behavior change. And do you think the change to online is permanent or is it temporary? So while you're all popping your messages in the chat box, I am just going to say, well, what did our survey group come up with? Thank you, permanent, yes. And you can see there was a 78%, yep, I can see quite a few permanents, 78% permanent change and 22% temporary. We also got some really interesting comments, and I've picked out 3 for you here, and they all go to the fact of it's focused on a new normal. There's going to be a long-lasting impact, or we are changed forever. And then this last one, you'll see that there's a viable alternatives are now there, the fact that we know an online environment will work for us. Yes, absolutely. And there's a lot of social engagement is very temporary and it's very mixed. I think there's 2 different sides to that. We have some further interesting comments as we come up, so please keep them coming. So as we said earlier, people are segmenting their time and they can't possibly consume all the info. And that makes time is now becomes a challenge for us. And we also see an increased challenge to get noticed. More content, more online, more people, more companies competing. And this shift has more digital touch points for us. But I think it's also made us get more creative, and it's made us step up to the challenge of ensuring our brand stands out against the competition. So I have another question for you. And again, use the chat box for me, and thank you for all the participation. So what are some of the new tactics or approaches that you are using today to stand out from the crowd and connect with your customers, so that either it's that you're more personable or more human? And we've given you 3 options to choose from ABC, or I'd love to hear your comments of what you're trying. And while you are filling out your comments on the chat box, I'm going to share with you what other examples of what people have tried. So this is one of my favorites. This is a development director here at Amplexor, And he hiked 15 miles up a mountain in Colorado to record a personalized video to impress the customer. It certainly impressed me. We also tried out things like a live doodler, and the doodler illustrated a virtual event for us so we could have an illustrated infographic and share it with our customers. It was well received, and we got a lot of future content built out of this. We've also tried the personalization through sending gifts to clients, and naturally US based, because gifts in maybe other markets might not always culturally be deemed as appropriate. So coming back then to the poll, and keep your answers coming, this is how our survey group answered. And of the options, you can see 60% says personal video outreach was the area they most tried something new in. 8% only used text as an increase. As you can see, the gifts to customers was not popular. Nobody was trying that out, but everything's worth a try, isn't it? And then we have 32% provide other suggestions. And of those others, we can see a lot of comments coming through with, a lot of it has to do with video and human connection. So you see the camera is always on approach, using the phone, personal communication. And the last comment is pretty spot on. We do see a lot of behind the scenes now, don't we? So much so, I mean, I'm not sure how many parrots I've seen, but for sure, the kids photobombing calls, that's become a pretty normal thing at the moment. So moving on to the human side and building relationships. This is another area heavily impacted by the pandemic. And don't you fondly remember the days of business dinners or face-to-face time, travel, this interaction with our customers? And what do you do now? We have no choice but to build and create relationships virtually. The camera's on. We're limited to a set meeting time. So there's less chit-chat time, which means less connection time with customers, which makes that a degree harder. So coming up to our third poll question, we asked our survey group, and again, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat screen. We asked our survey group, what is your #1 prediction for the future of the customer journey? And we provided 5 options. So deeper personalized outreach, continued increase of digital communication channels, available technologies influencing buyer behavior, content available in more languages, and a more shift to visual communication. So if you want to use your chat box again for what you think that answer is, please go ahead. And yes, thank you. I see a lot of ease. And yes, thank you. And trust and relationships, perfect. All of them, yes, they could be #1, John, I do think so. So let's see what our survey group came out with. So as you can see, it was quite mixed, but the leading way was 37% deeper personalized outreach. 2% continued increase of digital channels, 24% tech influenced buyer behavior, 16% content should be available in more languages, and 20% voted to a shift for more and more visual communication. So I can see here coming through from a lot of you are thinking more visual communication, and thank you. Keep the comments coming of what you're trying and what you're trying out. So our comments again from the survey were really helpful, and it's always great to get these further insights. So the first one is very interesting, and I would agree, we've seen more of a shift to values and relationship-based experiences. We noticed too that our customers are asking deeper questions during the buying cycle, and they're more interested in the values and are they a fit for their company, are the relationship and the cultural fit. The next one too here is speaks to the people element that we've been speaking about for the last couple of slides, and that a trend to humanize the customer journey. And the last one, I think that's also very interesting. We may need more online security, and both technological and legislation. So the survey group and all the comments provided to us gave us insights into the nature of this shift in the customer journey and how we should get ready to position ourselves better to influence those customer touch points on that journey. So we've put together some key takeaways as to how the future of the customer journey may change and what you should consider in your strategy. And this may come as no surprise. So our first takeaway is video on, camera on. It's very much here to stay. And so it's a key touch point in making a human connection and in how our customer strategy, we now have to think about how are we going to make this medium effective. And you've got the obvious challenges of being able to see behind the scenes, people's offices and homes, and the challenge of people's comfort level on video, both your eye contact, body language, head movement. And you'll have to ask, will it be okay for maybe half your team to turn on the camera and the other half not? And how will this appear to your customers and to how you engage with suppliers? And also we need to consider the global market and what's culturally appropriate. So using video or camera on as a medium, the goal there is to connect with the buyer. But if it's culturally suitable in one country, something may not work the same in another. So do understand the local buyer. And it's not just about conferences or online meetings, which is what we're doing here. It's even just about sending video clips, just like our sales director sent from the Colorado mountains. You're finding something to differentiate yourself and create that human and personal touch with video. So our next takeaway is humanization over automation. And sorry, I'm laughing at Talia's joke, human and humor, yes. From this pandemic, we can now see buyers and consumers have gained a very deeper appreciation for human contact. We've been deprived for so long. So we're predicting there'll be more richness in the human connection and a richer way to interact. So whether it's buyers or prospects or customers, they're still people. And while they fall into certain patterns of behavior, there's always unexpected elements you need to consider in that customer journey, no matter what the touch point. And so what we think will make the difference is the emotional response and connection. I mean, if you think of it, we have an explosion of fast, user-generated media today, and it's very easy to make errors. And it's also more acceptable to be wrong or not perfect, as long as you recognize it. And it's this moment that the human element needs to be strong, because we're just humans dealing with humans. And customers are smarter these days, we know that. So as marketers, we have to show them we're human. The third takeaway leads from this and is personalization and adding that personal touch. And we know it has to be more than just calling our customers by their first name, and that's something that's still not culturally acceptable in some countries. But personalization really is the call for brands to show emotion, be relatable, drive empathy, show their personality in their content and visuals so they build that connection. And if you consider the touch points on the customer journey and where automation does serve its purpose and where the personalized touch needs to come to the fore, then you can deliver more tailored content. So we see a trend at the moment for engaging field marketers with sales qualified leads to bring that personal touch point in delivering tailored content. And another thing maybe to consider is, have you considered how you're making the content memorable to the end user? We recently presented with Dr. Carmen Simon, who is a well-known neuroscientist here in the US, and she speaks about patterns and repetition. And from the neuroscience, she is saying the brain recognizes patterns and repetition improves memory. So the brain perceives the brand visuals and will process faster and easier each time it sees the visuals. And this will help bring people back to your content more often when the repetition continually through your content will help make it memorable. And that also adds that personal touch. Our fourth takeaway then is prioritizing the relationship and experience over a transactional approach. And we've touched on this human element and deeper, richer human connection from a lot of the survey feedback that's come up. So we've also experienced the emphasis on what the customer really needs in the buying cycle, and also seeing a noticeably longer buying cycle. I feel I suppose the pandemic impact has made B2B buyers more focused on building longer relationships, asking deeper questions, and ensuring there is a cultural fit for that. And then lastly, the last takeaway, leaving the biggest for the last, is technology. And dare I say, we have a lot of technology today, but we still need more technology to be able to deliver on these key takeaways, to be able to deliver the multimedia, the personalization effects that we now should be incorporating as part of our user journey and our customer journey strategy. Maybe even if you think back at the beginning of the pandemic and COVID, conferences were not so good, and we were trying to fit the old way of doing things into video, and it didn't work, so we got creative. And now I hear from the industry that technology is going to deliver even more virtual type experiences for conferences in the future, so I'm looking forward to that. So technology can and will make it easy for us to communicate in a more human and personalized way with our buyers, with our prospects, and the need and demand is there. We just now need more delivery flexibility. And so these trends for video, humanized and personalized methods are very evident this year. And the more permanent shift to online usage is very real, very valid. So we as marketers now need to build this into our future customer journey strategy. And it's exciting. It's going to keep us on our toes, and it's going to keep us continually innovating and bring that momentous change to our customer journey. So thank you so much for attending today and for all of your comments. And thank you for the comments and great key takeaways and discussing what the future of the customer journey could look like. I think, John, we want to take a few minutes for maybe one or two questions if we've time.
I think we have time for one question, looking through. And I guess, super insightful, some great insights. Oh, I'm going to stop sharing for a sec. There we are. And now I think we see all three of us right now. Yes. But yeah, one question before we kind of close out the first half of the day. You were talking about the challenges of personalization in global markets. And I'm just wondering, what are some of the key things to consider for global markets when personalizing content?
Wonderful question. And I suppose we deal with this every day with a lot of global customers. Maybe I think the first thing is avoid the strategy of one size fits all. You definitely need to know your audience, be open, be more aware to that local feedback. So a bit like sending a gift in the US is not going to work in sending it in Germany, or opening it with, "Hi Sharon, how was your day?" in the US is just not going to work in Germany. It needs to be like, "Dear Mr." But it's more than that. It's then about how you're addressing that buyer persona, the level of formality or conversational. And I think you can adapt and find a great cultural fit. And I think people are writing more content, John, instead of going from one language into another, or adapting more. So makes for a super fascinating conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Sharon. This has been super kind of exciting the whole morning so far, and we appreciated you talking about the customer journey and how it's evolving.
Thank you.